step outside, I see the world for what it is. No, spending all my time with people that I barely know. You may have thought that I was lost, but all I need is room to grow. I'm coming home to put a flower in your hair. Thought you should know, ain't no place I'd rather be instead. Sometimes I feel alone, you know it's me and my guitar. We're looking up the darling stars, singing where we supposed to go now. Ruthie, little lady, tell me what you mean to me. And I'll build a house in Byron Bay, if that's exactly where you'll be. I'm coming home, put a flower in your hair. Thought you should know, I'd rather be instead. No.
knocking at my door. A little too late for, I'm sorry for. The lights went out cause you kept cutting the cord. And I started to fade into your grave. See, I finally opened up my eyes, and I saw me coming back to life. That I'd be better without you inside. It's time to be someone I wanna recognize. The future starts right now. I made a reservation, but you never came, so I'm checking out. The fire stole away. I know one day we'll come back.
Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. Please be seated, all of you. Dear Minister, dear Excellencies, Rector, friends, and all those who are physically here or indeed digitally with us. I know there are a lot of you. This year's Nobel Peace Prize, finally, some of us would say, went to courageous journalists and editors. Dmitry Muratov from Russia and Maria Ressa from the Philippines. Many interpret this award to be dedicated to all the freedom-loving journalists across the world. Yesterday we received news, however, that journalist Orlando Dinoy from the Philippines had been killed by 6 gunshots to his body from a so far identified gunman. Far too often we hear about these unidentified gunmen. And we know that 21 journalists in the country of the Philippines have been killed since President Duterte took power in 2016. In Burma, Myanmar, a decade of relative freedom happened from 2011, and it came to an abrupt end by the coup d'etat in February this year. 53 journalists are behind bars, according to recent information. Media are much closed down. Many people, including many journalists, have fled, and many more have tried. In Afghanistan, media also blossomed after the fall of the Taliban in 2001, and they had a very liberal and nice media law in the country. It was never just easy in Afghanistan, as in Myanmar, but critical journalists did their best, the last years facing an increasing number of assassinations and other attacks. Now, with the second Taliban takeover, many people have again fled, and many more try to escape. Many more, not least young women journalists, beg for a safe place, fearing for their lives in a media situation developing from bad to worse. I would like you just to pay attention to the photos you see behind here. They are all selected from a photo exhibition we launched some weeks back, all from Afghanistan, from the Afghan Photographers Association, who launched a competition to which they selected out of more than 600 pictures, a mere 46, of which you see some here. And among them you see the 3 who won the awards. Today we will have a closer look at these 2 countries, Myanmar, Burma, and Afghanistan. But before that, I'm happy to introduce the new Minister of Foreign Affairs, the same ministry whose section on democracy, human rights, and equal rights support the Journalism and Media International Center, who is the host here today, and including they also supported this event. Anniken Huitfeldt has been elected Member of Parliament since 2005, has held 3 other ministerial posts, so she's a veteran minister, we could say, and has chaired the Standing Committee of Foreign Affairs and Defence at Stortinget. So, Minister Anniken Huitfeldt, the floor is yours. Feel most welcome.
Dear all, thanks to our partner OsloMet for hosting this very important event. At the time I entered into politics, we were witnessing progress for democracy all over the world. Free elections were held in ever more countries. Today, the situation is different. We are witnessing attacks against democracy in several parts of the world. The attacks are often coming from within, in countries that have elected rulers. Attacks on the independence of judiciaries, attacks on the independence of civil society, and not least, on the topic of this conference, attacks on freedom of expression by denying the media the right to free and independent reporting. I know that many of the distinguished panelists are reporters that have themselves become targets. The 2021 World Press Freedom Index from Reporters Without Borders ranks Norway first in the world for journalistic freedom. To me, that gives us a special responsibility to raise questions about journalistic freedom in other countries. Right now, independent journalism is being threatened in both Afghanistan and in Myanmar. Afghan journalists are facing pressure by Taliban. There is documentation that some have been subjected to violence and even tortured. In many provinces, female journalists and media workers are not allowed to return to work. There are reports that the Taliban have contacted journalists to censor the content of their work. Some flee in fear of persecution. Several media platforms are closing due to the looming economic crisis. In total, freedom of press and freedom of expressions are in danger in Afghanistan. Myanmar has today some of the highest number of jailed journalists in the world. Imprisoned journalists are enduring violence and abuse. Myanmar post-coup assault on the free press is forcing journalists into hiding. Many news organizations have been obliged to shut down. Let me be clear. We cannot tolerate these attacks on the freedom of expression. The global democratic backsliding must be reversed. This is why the government has put human rights and democratic development at the heart of our new political platform. We will intensify our efforts to protect freedom of expression, including media freedom. We will work to expand and strengthen the democratic space. And we will work to ensure the safety of those who dare to report truth to power. When journalists are imprisoned, killed, or forced into exile, it is a problem for the society as a whole. I want to end my address today with the words from Maria Ressa. She says, "When we won't have facts, we don't have the truth. When we don't have the truth, we don't have the trust. And when we don't have facts, truth, nor trust, we don't have democracy. Norway will stay committed in our efforts to protect these values." Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Minister. And here is our next speaker, our rector, Nina Waaler, who will give you a token of appreciation. And we also have another token waiting for you there, 2 books produced by our department. Thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you for the invitation.
And Nina Waaler, who is known to most of you here, but not perhaps to the international viewers who are online, but she is now our rector for the time being, and she will address this audience from her perspective as part, or as the leader of this institution. Thank you.
Dear Minister, guests and colleagues, journalism is under pressure in many countries across the world, and there is ample reason for worrying about the fate of media institutions and indeed for journalists living in authoritarian countries. Journalism represents a backbone of free expression and thus democracy and citizen rights. Without journalism, oppression, mistreatment, assassination of citizens may pass under our radar. At OsloMet's Faculty of Social Sciences, we are proud to have the Department of Journalism and Media Studies, representing the oldest and largest institution in Norway for education of journalists. Among our master graduates, we have several who wrote extensively on the media coverage of Afghanistan, which later resulted in an anthology. Another master student delivered a brilliant thesis on democratic voice of Burma. Our university recently signed an MOU with Kabul University last year, in which cooperation with the Department of Journalism and Communication was an important part. The situation has changed much since then, both for higher education and for journalism. In 2014, a post-dictatorship period of optimism, we had visitors from the University of Yangon, both teachers and students. Also there, the situation has changed dramatically. From both countries, we now witness an exodus of journalists since they are no longer able to work due to fear of persecution and media closures. That is very timely for Journalism and Media International Center to focus on the situation for journalists in these two countries. While we hope for the conditions for free media and free expression will change. All credit for you for important and great work. Thank you.
Okay, you'll need a shelf soon. And before we move to the panels and more specific spotlights on the two countries in focus today, we have a keynote from Agnes Callamard, who was until late. Oh, she's there. Fantastic. She is now the Secretary General of Amnesty International with a wonderful track record when it comes to fighting for freedom of expression and press freedom through her 9-year leadership of Article 19, and became especially well known after that for her work as UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial summary or arbitrary executions from August 2016 to March 2021, handling, among other cases, the brutal murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. You might have heard of that name. She has a very long CV list, but I will not steal time from you, Agnes. I would like you to take the microphone and address the audience now. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to join you digitally for this important event and conference. And I think the two previous speakers have highlighted the stake and why press freedom matters so much. It matters at every time, but it particularly matters in times of duress, conflict, and counter-normative revolution, as we are experiencing right now. We are living in a world of change. Threats and challenge overlap, intertwine. The climate crisis, current and future pandemic, deep inequalities between and within states, a global economy delivering unimaginable wealth to a bare few, and very low wages or no wages at all to millions. The latest of the Industrial Revolution centered in information technology has transformed our daily life and world societies. It is not well understood, let alone well controlled. These are historical global forces driving the interconnectedness of our world demanding collective action at a global level, on a global scale, demanding fact, demanding truth, demanding trust, like Maria said. And we have very little of that right now. These global forces are all the graver because we are in the midst of a reshaping of the international system and international relations. The superpowers, China and the US, are vying for hegemony, while a third, Russia, is seeking to disrupt, destabilize. Trade wars, dispute over sovereignty, proxy conflict, or hotspot multiply the world over, while the possibilities of finding and implementing global common solution become slimmer as a recent failure to do just a simple thing, to renew the mandate of a group of experts on Yemen, one of the world's most serious human rights and humanitarian crises, highlight. The international community at the Human Rights Council could not agree to renew the mandate of the group of experts on Yemen. Similar stalemate and failures are occurring in many parts of the world, but including the two countries that are the focus of the conference, Myanmar and Afghanistan. The failure to find broad agreement globally and collectively impacts directly on the work and protection of the media and individual journalists. Information is part and parcel, has always been part and parcel of any kind of conflict, whether military or otherwise. It is certainly part and parcel of the reshaping of the world because that reshaping is taking a normative dimension. It is part and parcel of the diplomatic fight, and of course of the military one. Journalists are thus easy pawn and target in that system. Narratives on all sides are going to question fact and truth, and to do so they need to attack the work and words of those on the ground who investigate and report on what's happening. Hence, individual journalists are targeted and silenced through arbitrary detention, disappearance, and killings. Women journalists are singled out for gender-specific harassment, threats, and sexual violence. In many ways, many of you who have been in the field for very long will argue there is nothing new there. And indeed, I think in many ways, what we are witnessing is a heightening, a sharpening of trends that have been monitored for many years. But the sharpening and the increase of those trends matter, and the context within which they occur matter. Because there is a real normative, military, political conflict over the soul of the world, over the soul of the global multilateral system we want to put in place, over the soul of global governance. And in that context, information and journalism are really key to every parties to that conflict. Hence, in my view, the real need, urgency to focus on the protection of truth, and through that on the protection of media and journalism. I think throughout the conversation, we're gonna speak more about the situation in Afghanistan and Myanmar, particularly with regard to press freedom. I don't want to repeat what will be probably presented, just to say that in both countries, we do find a great deal of similar trends, clamping down on media through the laws or through some form of regulations, such as the Taliban, through the use of very unclear words, regulations in general, such as very vague conditions around reporting contrary to Islam, or tricking the public. In both countries, media outlets have been closed, journalists have been detained and imprisoned. Many of them have also been the subject of violent attacks. Just in the case of Afghanistan in October 18, at least the cases of violence have been documented, while a woman, a journalist in Afghanistan who made up 30% of the media before the Taliban took over, have now become invisible, I will say, in the media field. Both countries also confront very similar broader development, which largely help explain the targeting of the journalist. The current crisis, a military coup, Taliban takeover, were preceded by years, if not decades, of arbitrary rules and the broad failures of the international community to hold those in power to account for their crimes, as well as in the case of Afghanistan, to hold the international military forces to account. Secondly, both countries have been confronting and are now confronting a much more serious humanitarian crisis, with the fighting and the violence resulting in thousands, if not millions, of people being internally displaced and facing extremely harsh conditions in both countries. In both countries as well, solutions for the crisis are significantly complicated by geopolitical dynamics and the conflict between the US and China. It is much clearer maybe in the case of Myanmar, where the key allies are shielding the Tatmadaw from accountability while maintaining the supply of weapons. And China and Russia are likely to wield their veto power to scuttle meaningful action at the UN Security Council. In the case of Afghanistan, there seems to be so far some form of international agreement, but that's pretty weak even there. There is a lowest common denominator around the non-recognition of the Taliban so far, but further than that, one can already see China and Russia moving towards closer relationship. As for the Western countries in Afghanistan, they have come across rather as reluctant to adopt and push for a strong fact-finding mechanisms for the country, possibly too more concerned with the threats posed by ISIS and the possibility of mass migrations. So all of that context make for finding solutions and protection of the journalists and the media in both countries extremely difficult. And that requires all of our effort coming together and making it a key priority. To end my quick speech, I wanted to propose some way forward. I mean, clearly we need to be able to invest quickly in those highly volatile situations to ensure the safety of journalists' exit option and to exert pressure on the authorities. There is a need for concerted action, which can be difficult, but there is a need for resources to protect journalists in both countries and indeed in situation of armed conflict and crisis. So, you know, one very important action that the community should be able to take, international community, is around fact findings, monitoring that the press are able to report, that journalists are not being targeted, and the importance of effective human rights monitoring system in the countries, including from outside, by the way. It is absolutely crucial that in those situations, the UN, the OHCHR in particular, play a key role in documenting what is happening to journalists in both countries and human rights defenders. This is why Amnesty International and others were pushing for fact-finding mechanisms in Afghanistan, but even in the case of Myanmar, where this is clearly not possible, the UN can and should monitor the situation from outside. So really keeping the spotlight on the violation through reporting work of the OHCHR, through the work of the special procedures, such as the work I did as a special rapporteur, is very important and is backing up the work that human rights organizations and press freedom organizations are doing, which is an essential work. And here they too need the resources and the support to back that up, and to support the work of those on the ground who are collecting the information. Because ultimately, of course, it is local journalists who are the victims. It is local media that are being targeted. So we do need to have far greater tools in our toolbox to ensure that those journalists can keep functioning, including outside the countries. You know, many of us have worked in the field long enough to know that for many years, the Myanmar journalistic community worked outside Myanmar and was an essential source of information. They worked, you know, in Thailand, among other places. We need to be able to support journalists in exile so that they can re-establish media outlet and keep working through their contact in the country. That needs investment, that needs resources. We need, of course, to get people out of the country now, at least those who wish to do so that they can pursue their work. I would like to also point to a broader gap in the international community's response to attacks on journalists, not just attacks in conflict situations or in situations like in Myanmar or Afghanistan, but when I was investigating the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and indeed a range of other killings, such as the killing of the French journalists Ghislaine Dupont and Claude Verlan, who are at the source of November 2 Day Against Impunity. They were killed on November 2. I came to the conclusion that as an international community, we really do not have effective mechanisms to investigate those killings or those acts of violence. We rely on local entities, and many of them are part of the problems. We rely on local and international organizations, but they do not carry the same legitimacy as a UN or international backed mechanism. So this is why I have called for the international community to advocate and put in place a UN standing international investigation instrument that could independently investigate acts of violence against journalists, support those on the ground that may be doing such investigation, and identify accountability mechanism, because that's the other missing piece in the puzzle of combating impunity and violence. There is the investigation piece, which is often not being done. And then there is the accountability piece, which comes after the investigation, and it's also not being done. So I believe that the international community can do more. They can put in place and should put in place a UN standing international investigation instrument. Many of you are going to say, well, tough luck given the international context. And yes, indeed, it will be difficult, but it has been done before. We've had a standing international investigation for Syria. Indeed, we have one on Myanmar at the moment. So there are moments where we manage to get international agreement. We just need to find and identify countries that are willing to do all of the diplomatic work in Geneva, in New York, and in capitals to allow for that kind of instrument to get sufficient momentum and approval. In conclusion, freedom of the media is under assault. Online and offline content are censored, overly regulated, including by monopolistic private companies. And the dissemination of false news is undermining democratic institutions, discrediting quality information and fact, undermining human rights, pushing for a global reshaping of our common norms and common values, which should be extremely concerning of us all. A global governance system predicated on sovereignty plus untruth plus political violence, needless to say, doesn't augur of much for us. So let's work together towards making the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize a crucial moment when press freedom will be celebrated, when we all come together to demonstrate the vibrancy of that international movement, to demonstrate the vibrancy of our commitment to press freedom, the strength of our resolve to protect and enhance the work of the media and journalists around the world. We must build on that milestone. It cannot just stand alone. Let's look at it as a springboard towards initiating a global system centered around human rights and around the work and the protection of journalists and press freedom. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Agnes Callamard. Since you're not with us here, but based in London for the moment, I cannot give you a physical gift, but I wish we can bring these books over to you in another sense, by snail mail or by any other person going to London. So thanks, and stay with us as long as you can. This speech was indeed very thoughtful and not least constructive, which is one of our aims here, to be constructive. We know that there are many people also on the ground, I think both in Myanmar and in Afghanistan, who also listen to this. I just want to mention it because I had this morning a WhatsApp message from one student that I've been in contact with, and he had, for his group, put up, now it is 2 o'clock in Norway and then it's 5:30 here in Afghanistan. So he was reminding his friends about this, so they should all hear. So I hope you can hear us here. You cannot respond, but this message is to you guys. We shall now turn to our next panel, and one of the panelists is a leading lady in Afghan journalists, among Afghan journalists, director of the Killid Media Group, and also a leader of International Association of Women in Radio and Television, Division Afghanistan. She had to flee the country after the Taliban took over. She is currently in an evacuee camp in Virginia, US, where the conditions for digital communication are bad. So there's so much noise there. So if we had her on Zoom, it would not function. But she has kindly prepared a video for us. So the two panelists who will be on the stage shortly, just to be mentally prepared. But first we will hear from Najiba Ayubi. She will initiate the discussion about journalism in Afghanistan.
Everyone. It is my pleasure to be connected with you, and thank you for the organizers for making this opportunity for all of us to talk with each other. We, Afghan people, lost our 20 years achievement during few hours, when the Taliban taken the control of the presidential palace. Following that, a very bad situation came up because there was insecurity, and also a number of the embassies and foreign organizations, they left the country, including US Embassy. They stopped their work in Afghanistan. Following that, a huge process of evacuation started, and I would like to use this opportunity and say thank you for our international friends and colleagues that they help us, our people, our civil society, and also the media and civil society workers to leave Afghanistan during the evacuation process. It was a big help. They helped the people that their life was in danger. Journalists and civil society activists had a very high level of risk even before Taliban take over. In last 2 years and also the years before, we lost a number of civil society activists and also a number of journalists, men and women, national and international journalists. It was a difficult time for us. It was a difficult time for everyone because we spent time, energy, and efforts for making change in our country. But suddenly we saw everything lost. We lost everything during few hours. It was very difficult and shocking, even for me, for everyone in Afghanistan. We never think like this. It was a deal, a political deal, and we lost everything for a political deal. We were very hopeful to have a peaceful Afghanistan because 18 months back, the efforts of peace and the negotiation of peace was started officially. And we all spent our time, energy, and did a lot to make peace in my country, to have democracy in my country. But all our dreams, we lost all our dreams in few minutes. It was not easy. Now, a big concern of Afghan journalists and media workers is that in many places of Afghanistan, even in the cities and also in the district level, we don't have journalists. Having no journalists in some area means there's no news from that area. And now people are disconnected with decision makers, and it is a disaster for a country, a poor country like Afghanistan. Many negative things happen in different parts of Afghanistan, but no news come up to the media. Why? Because we don't have journalists here. 70% of the media are closed. Most of them are TVs and radios. And also the print media, even the print media had no good situation before the Taliban. 50% of Afghan journalists lost their jobs because their media was closed down, and also a number of them was left the country because their life was in danger and risk. They must leave Afghanistan. And now we have a lot of places, we don't have news from that places. Especially women journalists is a very high level of risk, and a big number of them lost their jobs and they are sitting at home because they are not allowed to work as they worked before. From one side, Taliban are not allowed them to work, and from the other side, their families, because of the non-security, because of this high level of risk, they are not agree with their women and girls to work as a journalist because they know this is a risky job. I know a journalist that he left his job after 16 years of professional work. He was a very good investigator and he left his job. I asked why you left your job because he was my colleague. I asked why you are leaving your job. He said, I cannot do something is not real. It is very difficult for me, he said. It is very difficult for me to reality and facts be something and I say or write something else. It is very difficult for me and that is why it is good for me to sit at home instead of working as others want. I want to work as a journalist as I want in the reality, on the basis of the realities of the society. The other problem right now is access to information. The access to information level is in the lowest level during last 21 years. And before, actually we had access to information problem before Taliban, but now it is, the level is very high and journalists face difficulties access to real information. Because I heard from some spokesperson, I heard from a journalist that he contacted some spokesperson of some ministry last week. He said something happened, some fighting or some war happened in some part of Afghanistan, and the journalist called to the spokesperson of some embassy to please say if the war has happened there and what was happened and give me information. He said there was a war of Daesh and we don't talk about the war which happened by Daesh and Taliban because the Daesh will become famous. It means they want to put a lot of limitation on the access to information. And in this situation, in this difficult time, we expect from our international colleagues, our international friends, and also the organizations that they are working for supporting media and journalists to be connected more than before. We need more unity than before. We need help of our colleagues. I expect from our international colleagues in different parts of the world to cover the topics that Afghan journalists inside of Afghanistan cannot cover the topics because of some problems that you know. It will be good if other journalists from different parts of Afghanistan, from different parts of the world, cover that issues. Otherwise, Afghanistan will remain as a dark place of the news, and too many news never come to the media, and it is limitation that people of Afghanistan and also people of the world will face. Thank you for making me this opportunity, and very sorry because I don't have a very good place to talk. I came to the forest near to our tent in the army camp because I spent, this is 2 months I'm spending in an army camp with my family, and it is very difficult situation, but I wanted to really talk with you all and have you, I wish you a very good day and very happy life. Thank you.
Najiba, I know you're trying to listen there, so thank you for this video. And it tells volumes about the patience that people who have evacuated their own country have to still have, waiting for a more stable situation. this was the best location Najiba Ayubi could find to record her words. And that should tell you something. Now I want to see some two men on the scene. Now we've had lots of women so far, that's nice. But there are also men here who are going to speak. And we are waiting to hear Dr. Samay Hamed. Could you please come forward? We're looking now at a multi-artist, an author, a poet, a freedom of expression fighter, who also recently escaped from his beloved country. Most welcome to you. And also welcome to our former MA graduate here from OsloMet, now reporter in Aftenposten. And among us here, I think I dare say that he is the last person to have seen the insides of Afghanistan, actually, because he just came back from Afghanistan 2 weeks ago after traveling for approximately 1 month, crisscrossing the whole country, and left us with reports and also very impressive photos, since he has a very good sense of how to make a humanitarian reportage with photos, as Dr. Hamed's poetry also has that ability, we know, I know for a long time actually. This poetry has in mysterious ways found its way into Norwegian media. So he also published a recent collection of poetry, which he will later also read from a little bit. But without further ado, I'd like to start with asking you some questions, and you'll have to share this microphone. I think you know how to put it on and off. First to Hamed. After what we've seen of the collapse of journalism in your country, is there a chance for some bits and pieces of that free expression that you enjoyed and for that journalism that you also enjoyed to survive under the current regime?
Thanks, the great Elisabeth. Happy to have you. Nice to meet you. For the first time. Yeah, for the first time. We have written to each other. And I would like to also apologize for my English. Spoken in English, it's like as bad as Zalmay Khalilzad's Persian and politics. So therefore, yeah.
Zalmay Khalilzad, can you tell who he is,
yeah.
For those who don't know?
I should say that once in 2003, a journalist asked me about freedom of expression in Afghanistan, and I said that we have freedom of expression in Afghanistan, but nothing to express. This is the issue. But for 2 decades, we have experienced freedom of expression inside Afghanistan. We had been victimized for freedom of expression inside Afghanistan, and it is not just in the time of the Taliban. It was also before. Both from the Waaler side, the target killings of the Taliban, and also from the government side, especially in rural areas of Afghanistan. Because I can say that democracy in Afghanistan was mainly democracy of paved roads of Afghanistan. So therefore, to know the future of freedom of expression in Afghanistan, especially under the terrorist regime. Now we have the government of the Taliban is the government of terrorists, the government of extremists, the government of proxy warriors. So, if you know Taliban, they don't believe, their ideology is against freedom of expression, against freedom of opinion. So, how you can work for freedom of expression under that kind of flag, yeah? That kind of opinion. But in Afghanistan, freedom of expression had always been connected to 4 C's. The first C is courage of journalists, especially nowadays. You can experience, the new generation YouTubers and also some young journalists who are working with, especially the women, the new generation. they are experiencing freedom of expression. They are paving the road for freedom of expression because of their own courage. It is not because we have freedom of expression in Afghanistan. The second issue is, the second C is connections. It is not just under the Taliban's regime that we have problem regarding freedom of expression. For example, when in the Republic time, even when I was senior advisor for the president of Afghanistan, if something was happening in some areas, especially in Waaler areas or some other areas, or even, in National Security Council of Afghanistan, because National Security Council of Afghanistan had been a lot against the free media, a lot. So then we had to contact some good guys in the government. For example, before somebody would call Dr. Spanta, or for example, Fazal Sangchareki at the Ministry of Culture and Information, or Shiwa Shark, some connections. So then they would solve the problem. It was not the constitution which had solved the problem. It is the same now during the Taliban period. It is completely the same. Some media houses or media networks, they are still, very active against some issues of the Taliban. They are very smooth, yeah? But they are making programs against the Taliban. But why they can do that? It is because of courage. It is okay, completely okay. But at the same time, it is also because of connections, because that TV station or media network is related to one of the big guys who can potentially challenge the Taliban militarily or by any other way. The third C is content. So I'm not talking about content, but then I'm coming to the fourth one, which is credit. Why Najiba Ayubi said 70% of free media in Afghanistan had been collapsed. Is it because of the Taliban? It is not because of the Taliban. It had been collapsed before. 90% of more than 90% of free media in Afghanistan funded free media. I call them, dependent free media in a kind of satirical way. They had been collapsed because they had not had credit. They had not been supported by international organizations or any other organization. So therefore, we should work on those 4 C's, then we can deal, yeah?
I think you're right, but you skipped a little bit when it comes to content, and I wanted to challenge you on that, because as I haven't said before, but we have a group here monitoring Afghan media and the situation and the development, and we watch or read every day different outlets. And we register there seems to be something we could call critical news, in the sense that those are news that kind of bother the Taliban. I mean, they're not happy with these news, but they still exist. Do you recognize that also?
Yeah, of course. But as I said, some of these news is from some channels who had bases outside Afghanistan. Some of like Afghanistan International and other channels. Some of them are based on a kind of hidden self-censorship. For example, I am a TV host and saying to asking at the Taliban fighter and saying that why are you not allowing girls to go to school? Because Islam had allowed girls to go to school. This is a kind of hidden self-censorship, because they are, debating in a circle. Islam, two kinds of Islam, yeah? So therefore, it is just for smooth I think, critics.
Yes, and as you said, they're in dire straits economically speaking, so maybe they don't have to be so strict because the media might be strangled just by the lack of money. One question which I know one in the audience has particularly wanted to ask, so I'll ask it for him, that is about satire.
Okay.
I mean, I know you were doing satire. You are a good satirist yourself in your poetry and in other places, but is there any surviving satire, perhaps orally among people in hidden places, but any official or media satire still existing inside Afghanistan?
You know, I think you can just, listen to the Taliban's speech, the leader's speech. All of them, they're satirical, There is no need for satire inside Afghanistan, I think. Even, you can see some tweets from Ashraf Ghani or some from Khalilzad and others. There are lots of, not just satires, jokes, yeah?
So we could call it involuntary satire then. That's good. Thank you so much. We'll come back to you, but to Afshin Ismaeli now. You have covered the fall of Mosul in Iraq. You have covered the fall of Raqqa in Syria. And now you have witnessed the aftermath of the fall of Kabul. You were not there on that day, but you have seen what happened afterwards. And you first went to Mazar in Kabul. Can you tell us first about your experiences? Because I know you tend to be beaten up sometimes when you're in a country. I know photographers are more at risk sometimes than the people who are just writing the story. So, please.
Of course, as you said, that you don't need to look at their speeches. Just look at them. The satire is everything. Is with Taliban is, I mean, I call them the most. So they are a lot of humor, and they are really special species. So, but when it comes to the, I was in Kabul. It was really easy to enter the country. I mean, it was really when we entered the Afghanistan, and when we crossed, it was like two soldiers at the border, and one of them with the stamp, he couldn't even write. And it was really a sense of strange when you entered it. But when it comes to the first days was good, and then we end up in demonstration in Kabul. It was a big demonstration with us against the Pakistan and the drones, and when the Panjshir was attacked by the Taliban. So at the end of demonstration, we got, then the Taliban was really, now it's enough. The people are gathering, and it becomes more and more with demonstrations and the demonstrants. So they started to shoot at the air. Then when I was filming the demonstration, first when in the Mazar, so we got told that you have to wear shalwar and kameez. It's really safe. So if you have it, so it's good, Afghan dress. So I used it, and I used it under the demonstration, the shalwar and the Afghan dress. And when during the demonstration, I got attacked by Taliban. They came and they started to beat me with three persons with the AK-47 and the pistols on my head, and they broke my camera and they beat it up. And suddenly I ended up, I showed at them in English, I'm not an Afghan, I'm a journalist, a foreign journalist. Then they said, they let me go, and then I ended up with the Haqqani. They just took me inside his office, some guys from his network. And then they started to check my passport. Then I
Just
found...
a question, Haqqani is a particularly brutal network, Taliban allies, and they have strong positions in the government.
Yeah, they were. Then I got, when they find out I'm not an Afghan, they said, you are not Afghan, it's okay. And I told even the Haqqani himself that they beat me, they treated me bad, they broke my camera. They thought you are an Afghan journalist, that's the reason why they do that. I said, oh, that's what is the condition with the Afghan journalists there. And I was so lucky on that day that I was not an Afghan journalist. They could, what happened to the Itlaat, the journalists, two of them, they beat them to all their body was black. At the same day, other journalists got beaten, 15 others. But especially, they treat the Afghan journalists really, really bad. We were lucky and privileged to be kind of foreigner. However, they thought that I'm from there, but I try to always say, no, I'm from another place. If you say you speak Arabic, then you are really respected than the Afghan journalists, which I saw it in different positions, different cities, how the locals has been treated.
Yeah, you saw that. And I was thinking, when you met with these other journalists, I mean, one thing is many of us here in Norway have seen the red backs of Afghan journalists who were beaten very badly. But you traveled also and you met journalists along the way. And how did they cope with the situation?
It's not easy. I mean, especially we saw a lot of brave journalists, especially some female journalists who are really brave. I was really impressed at how they came out in that condition with that. I mean, they go so close to the Taliban and they challenge them, and they go there in their eyes. And I was really afraid at that conditions because some of them are really brutal and aggressive. And we experienced it in Herat, like in Kandahar, when the guys, they just load the weapon and they try to shoot us. Because the foot soldiers, they really, they don't know anything. They are really foot soldiers. They just come after 20 years of war. They were in the mountains and suddenly they come out and they control the cities with that mentality. So it's really difficult. I remember in Herat when he tried to shoot at us. Then I had two other female journalists with me. They screamed at him. Then he cooled down and he just left this place. And then we said we're gonna call the Zabihullah Mujahid. He's in charge of press. And they are really afraid of him, and he's really well respected between Taliban. Then they were afraid. However, we didn't call him because he never picked up the phone. But that's why you use it to scare the foot soldiers. And then the guy comes, a big guy, like adult guy, like over 50, and he came and like this, a big Taliban, and apologized the female journalist. I was really impressed how, I mean, it's really difficult to understand the Taliban sometimes.
Yes, I think you're right. I was visiting the country during the previous time of the Taliban, and I also had troubles understanding them. And interpretation was hard. But with you, you say that there are differences among the Taliban, and of course we have known that many of them have been brutalized by imprisonment, by torture, Guantanamo even. Yeah. And but do you see some of them who are actually also critical and more situational Taliban, just sort of waving the flag because that is the convenient thing to do now?
Yeah, of course. Some of them are just missing the war. They said, 20 years, I was in war for 20 years, now I don't have anything to do. Some of them are, I was with, we went to Musakala, it's like a base for Taliban, it's like a capital of Taliban in the south. It was a really strange city/village with no woman. Absolutely, you see no single woman at the city because they are not allowed to come outside. And it's like the base of Taliban who took over the country. They just spread it from that city. And you understand how the mentality from there gonna take over the whole country. But we were with the guy, he was a bomb maker and he killed thousands. He was, but he had a critical to Al-Qaeda. I was saying, he said Al-Qaeda destroyed our country. Some of them are different. Some of them are, I mean, like modern. Some of them are, but some of them are really interesting because I've been visiting some places which is really interesting, like zoo, police station, the Panjshir. That's people are coming, the Taliban's coming from all the country for visiting either the zoo in Kabul, a police station, and the prison. That's the only places they are interested in, most of them. But they are, I found them really primitive, most of them.
I guess that's true. One of the primitive sides was what we saw in one of your photos where you showed a Taliban soldier breaking a child's video inside the premises of the Norwegian embassy, actually. But I want the last question to you would be from your visit to Kandahar, because there you also visited and witnessed the humanitarian crisis which is increasing in Afghanistan now. You visited a hospital there. Can you say a little bit about that? And how the Taliban sort of cope with that reality of people dying under their watch, so to say?
I mean, it's difficult, the condition of humanitarian condition in Afghanistan, especially. I mean, in all places, especially with the coming winter, which is really cold in some areas. And it's like that, the malnutrited children is increasing, but it's doubled in the Kandahar. It was a really bad condition in the hospital in the Kandahar. But sometimes it's part of it is because it's different factors. One of them is like because of the international aid, which is not coming to the country. It's a lot of people are hungry. The number of beggars in the streets is increased a lot. I mean, it was a lot of people begged in the streets before, but now it's everywhere. You cannot, if you come out of the market, of the shops, everywhere it's like 10, 15 children who comes after you and asking for money. However, it was before, but it increased a lot. And it's the same in the hospital. The number is like doubled, tripled with the malnutrited because of the poverty. And another thing is like because of security, because with the coming Taliban, the security is back to the country. You can travel now freely to wherever you want in the countries. No one says anything to you. You have a paper, you just go. And that makes the people to move easily. A lot of people said in the hospital that they couldn't come to the hospital from like Zabul and the villages to the Kandahar hospital. And now, because of the security back, they can easily move to the hospital. That's another factor which is playing a role.
Yes, I was going to ask Hamed to comment on what Afshin just told now, and you have a couple of minutes more. We are going to continue towards 4 o'clock, so don't worry about the next panel. It will be great also, and there will be time for it.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I just wanted to explain something about the Taliban. Because when we are talking about Taliban, we are not talking about just one group. It is very important to know about that. We are talking about different groups, yeah? The first group in Afghanistan, we are calling them Pakistani Taliban or strategic Taliban, or they are famous as Haqqani network. This is the first group. And in Afghanistan, we are calling them the proxy war Taliban mostly. Then, as Afghanistan is the country of survivors, I can say my country is the country of survivors. Then the second group, we call them Afghani Taliban, or some of free media are calling them moderate Taliban, like Mullah Brothers group of the Taliban. So therefore, Pakistan had put Mullah Brother in jail for years because of this issue. And the other group, we call them drug dealing Taliban or drug trafficking Taliban. So there are different types of the Taliban. So when you are watching a Taliban in the street, yeah, or in a zoo, so most of them are also survivors, yeah? They are victims of this war, victims of the proxy war. They are the same. So the main problem is with the strategic Taliban, ideological Taliban. We have the problem with them. We can deal with others, yeah? It would be
I hope
easier.
so.
Yeah.
I hope so. We don't have much time left. Do you want to comment on this from your experiences with the Taliban very shortly? But I want you to ask you one more question. That is, the people who are not Taliban, how easy was it to get access to them and to let them to speak when you were there?
Now is anarchy in the country, so it's easy for everybody. It's like, as you said, it's like some medias are working. It's anarchy. Taliban doesn't have control over the media. Like BBC is Persian, Iran International and Afghan International is working there because in anarchy. They have reporters on the ground, but nobody knows who they are, and they don't publish with the names. It's most of that medias which is really against Taliban, they don't publish, even the Reuters. I have one of my friends working with the Reuters, they don't use his names because of the security issues. And it's a matter of time. When they have a control, the situation gonna change, of course. And when you say with the Taliban, of course, I met all of them. I see the difference. I mean, like the Helmandis with the mafia, I mean, drug dealers, immediately they were corrupted. They asked us for money, and of course, we have to pay money for the security. And you see the hardliners, they are really aggressive. And some of them, yeah, the survivors. Of course, that's, it's right.
Yes, I think this gives us a very, at least, rudimentary picture of who these people are. We want to conclude this with some art. There is a poem in your pocket, I think, Hamed. Or do you want somebody else to read it?
I would like to ask Warasta if he can read.
There is a person in the audience.
I have the printed version, yeah?
There's a person in the audience who has arrived to Norway. He is actually now in the IAWRT system as an exiled writer. He used to be the Secretary General of Afghan PEN, but was forced into exile because of persecution, and then Hamed took over. But yeah, I can say it because we are friends. His English is better than Hamed's, so he will read, and he has worked on Hamed's poetry as well. Please, Wahid Warasta. Yeah, sit with us.
Okay. Warm greetings to all dear guests who have arrived here.
And hold the microphone close to your mouth. Thank you.
Because I was, in fact, it was a surprise for me. So very warm welcome to everyone here, and it's an honor to be here. I hope I can read it in a proper way. Yes, I came from Afghanistan. It's of course the translation of translation from the Persian language. Okay. Yes, I came from Afghanistan. Why do you look surprised? I'm neither a production of latest lamentable news, nor as forlorn as depicted on media screens. See, I have a box of saffron in my bag, which smells as good as our village breeze. See, I have a classic poetry collection in my right pocket, and a restless pen in my left. While searching me for weapon and drugs, don't ignore my bitter smile. We have been at war for years, but remember, we have also been in love. Thank you very much.
Beautifully recited. Thanks to the whole panel.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone. Wahid Warasta, Samay Hamed, and Afshin Ismaeli. We will now move directly to the next panel, and I hope you will stay with us. And there are gifts, of course, for everyone. So, the next speaker addresses us from the US. I had the pleasure of meeting her when she was still in full swing working as an editor in Yangon. This is the second panelist today who was an educated physician, because Dr. Hamed also was a physician. But both of them resorted to writing and to journalism. In the 1990s, she received a prison sentence for 20 years, of which she had to serve 6 under appalling conditions. Now she serves as a board member of International PEN and chairs the Writers in Prison Committee. She escaped Burma, Myanmar after the last coup d'etat in February. And if she had not managed to disappear, she might have been one of the at least 55 or 53 imprisoned journalists in the country. Hello?
Hello.
Hello, Thida. Pleased to see you here. I'll have to turn my back to you due to the camera situation, but it's a pleasure to see you here. I read today from a freelance journalist in a Nieman report. He said that the post-coup situation in Myanmar is like an apocalypse of the media. So can I ask you, what is left of journalism, if any, in the country today?
Well, the situation is pretty worse, and the first attempt is to attack the journalists through not just physically, but also legally. So, for example, they revoked the licenses of some print and digital media, and also they arresting journalists, and the whole country is in war now. So for that reason, the distributions of the either print media or even for the digital, because of the internet shutdown, it's almost impossible. So even though some of the media has been allowed to practice, it's very, very hard to make a business or reaching out to get access to information or spreading the information back to the public. It's very, very hard condition right now. So I think our situation, our condition on the press freedom is almost zero and even minus, because, you know, the hard situation is not just the security of the journalists, but also the security of the right to information. It's the most crucial part we are facing, you know, because of the heavy propaganda through fake news, misinformation, and disinformation from the military is ever very, very problematic right now. So to combat it, I think some of the people with the lack of the media and information literacy, the counter misinformation, disinformation, and fake news is also going on. So it's really hard to verify what is the real fact, the true facts. That's why I think the trust on the information we are having or receiving is in pretty much critical situation. That's why every single person has been affected by this situation. So this is true. The whole situation of media inside Myanmar right now is very, very, very depressing.
I think we should now make you happy by asking two more people to join us here on the podium. One is A. Chan Nang, co-founder, chief editor, and executive director of Democratic Voice of Burma. He's having his cell phone, his microphone on now. He will be joined also by Thida Thin Myat Thu, program director of Democratic Voice of Burma, both founders actually in the year 1992. Can you believe that when you see these people? Of Democratic Voice of Burma in exile, and both also having been active in Burma, inside Burma, after 2012, when media enjoyed some freedom. We also have with us, luckily today, the Executive Director of International Media Support, Jesper Højberg. You will have to share a handheld microphone. And the International Media Support, some of you know, they have people on the ground in both countries spotlighted here today. But I continue with our digital guest here. I read that disappearances and nightly raids and arrests continue. How much do we know now about the fates of the journalists still in the country? I ask you first, and I will also ask the panel if you have any information of this. But first to Thida, please.
Well, sometimes the problem is sometimes they just randomly check the civilians and then they found it out. These are the journalists and they're happy to arrest them, something like that. So on the other hand, they usually targeted also the local media. And then even though they were released quite recently, some of the journalists were still under some charges. So in that sense, I think the situation towards the journalists is pretty much concerning.
Yeah. According to the Reporters Without Borders, 53 journalists are currently in detention. Do we know anything about their fate? Do you know?
Well, not really. The charges are mainly under defamation law 505, but it can turn out to be any other charges. For example, like Thida Thin Myat Thu from the Myanmar, she was charged under 505 and she was released under 505, but she was still charged under the Illegal Association Act, something like that. So they can arrest her anytime according to the other charges. Something like that. So the estimately, some of the journalists has been recently released, and we really don't know even their fate, even though they are physically free now. So under detention and under charges, this situation is pretty much in big question mark until and unless international intervention it's effective. So I doubt it. Even for the American journalist, Jenny Pfister is still in prison. And right now, I don't know, the intervention from the Bill Richardson might help or not. I don't know.
Would any panelists like to supplement Thida on this question about the fate of the journalists still in the country? Chan, for example?
Yeah, especially those in prison, you mean?
Well, yeah, any journalist on Burmese soil, so to say.
Yeah. But I like to start from my colleagues who got arrested and in prison. They were reporting after the military coup on the streets. And in the beginning, the first 1 month was pretty much like lots of demonstration happening, all around the whole 1 month. And a lot of young generation, student activists, everybody came out. And all our journalists were reporting quite freely. In the beginning. There was some arrests, but very minor arrests. But then after 1 month, the military started shooting demonstrators, and some of them were killed by snipers, like straight to the head. It was a total brutal crackdown, and lots of demonstrators were beaten, even in front of the cameras. And since then, nobody is safe any longer. And 1 month later, 3 of our journalists were arrested, and they were all brutally beaten. When the police came to one of our journalists' home, they came with like 20 soldiers to arrest him, one journalist. And they were shooting at his house, and he was brutally beaten. And 2 of them were brutally tortured for the first few days when they were arrested. What happened in Burma is like when you get arrested during the interrogation period, that could take 1 week to 2 weeks, and that was the time that you were brutally tortured by the interrogator. And once they transfer you to prison, then the torture stops. But of course, the prison conditions really, really bad. And we had an extra problem with the COVID-19 spread throughout the prison, and there was no proper medical treatments, no medications, no testing, no vaccination. So there was an extra sort of trouble for the activists, journalists, lots of people who got arrested. For example, even in same prison, which is in Yangon, the biggest prison, infamous prison in Burma. At some point, there were over like 10,000 prisoners, and the prison normally fit for like 5,000. So it's overcrowded. So that's
Yes, and I think those of us who are older than the average remember also reading accounts of the former imprisonment, both of Thida and of others. But some journalists didn't want to go to prison and they tried to escape, and they lived in the jungle among resistance groups and so on. And I know, Thida, your story is part of that. You had a narrow escape and a rather dramatical one. Can you tell us about that, please?
Yes. On the early morning of the military coup, there were some police came to my place. Then I had to run from my home. So since then, I'm now back to my home. And I was staying with my friends, place to place. But the problem is that, they came and checked houses during the night. So some of my friends, although they wanted to save me, they are not there to let me stay at their places anymore. So I had to hide place to place. Sometimes, for example, tonight I'm sleeping and I don't know where I'm going to stay tomorrow. So I was staying in that situation. And also the military, they cut off the internet lines. So sometimes they cut out both Wi-Fi and also mobile data. So when they cut off all the lines, then I cannot communicate to anyone. So sometimes also some of my friends they don't have Wi-Fi, so they have only the mobile data. So when I got in contact with the internet, then I'm trying to contact to like international media, like an Aftenposten, and also like an agent, and I even lost contact with him, But we are very lucky that when the military coup in Burma, our chief editor happened to be in Oslo, so he can continue to run the station. So, but for me, I have to run place to place and hide place to place. But of course, people try to help the journalists, and advantage is that they try to save the journalists. But disadvantage is that most of the people, they know my voice since from 1992 from the radio, or they know my face from television. So, sometimes, when I'm trying to escape from one place to another, then, someone saw me and they say, hello, hi, where are you coming to? Then, that night I can't really sleep or I can't eat, and, but actually they're trying to just say hello. So this is the situation I face. So, and also, as you mentioned, we both are co-founders of the DVB in 1992 in Oslo. So I am also I'm holding the Norwegian passport. So I don't have the Burmese citizen. So I cannot move from one city to another because they stop all the checkpoints and they check all the IDs. So I cannot run away or from this city to another. And also at the time a lot of journalists has been arrested, and a lot of demonstrators had been shot to kill, and a lot of friends although they really wanted to save me, but they can't accept me because they are the police and soldiers, they came to their houses, searching house by house for their visitors during the night. So people cannot accept me. So I have to take risk, whether how to escape from here, from Burma. Then, at the time also, some journalists and also some people has been arrested at the airport. So I was really sort of scared, and also lost contact with almost everyone, also the family and so on. But then, I decided if I can even leave from this city to another city, then, I'm not safe because I will be just hiding or on the run. So, my life will be just as nothing. So I thought, if I can escape from Burma, then I can continue to work. If I will be arrested, then just it is. I had no choice. So I decided to escape from Burma, and then luckily I also contact to the Norwegian embassy. I informed them that, I know I will take my risk. I know that they cannot save me, but I just want to inform that, I am taking risk and I am leaving from the airport. So, I also told them that, if I will be arrested, I understand that they cannot help me anything, but at least, I will be known as I am arrested. Sometimes we don't know who are arrested and where. So I am worried that, if I am just arrested as unknown, then, I will be easily be killed or something like that, So I contacted the Norwegian embassy and I explained them, and they're very kind, and they also said that of course they cannot interfere there, So I said I will take risk. So they very kind, and they walk me to the from the airport to the departure gate. So then, I was released. That even though, when I arrived here, I stay worried, if I should contact my family, or, I contact HR only when I arrived to one transit area, So even I arrive here, sometimes I don't feel that I'm safe, especially for my family. Now I am 52. I left from Burma when I was 18, and I was staying here in Norway, and reunited with my family is only 7 years. So, now I came here, like, I don't feel like I'm coming back to my home. I feel like I'm alone here. I even like, I wanted to share my experience, but first of all, I agreed to be in this panel. And then later on, I was really worried because I don't feel myself. I try to get fit both physically and mentally. And, I am also nervous.
So, it doesn't show.
Yeah. But then, I also wanted to share this experience, because I'm the one who faced the real situation so that, I can explain. Now I can explain, But when I was in Burma, inside Burma, on the run, then, I cannot really explain what is going on or something like that. But now here I can explain so that, you understand more what is really happening inside Burma, and also how journalists are facing, both physically, mentally, and with this situation, how we can continue, to save the journalists and also do the independent media, not only in Burma, also in different countries, of course.
Thank you. That was a very much of a learning story for us, an educative story, I'd say, because this illustrates so well the limbo many people have to face when they have to flee their country, and also the limbo they can feel when they arrive at a safe place. But I visited the radio station in Yangon in 2013. I met with Aichan there, and remember that, and with 40 very enthusiastic journalists. I think Rune Ottosen, who's here, was also there by then. And what do you know about the remaining staff now? Are they all out? All these 40 people that we met who were so enthusiastic and so willing to fight for democracy in the country. Where are they now? Aichan, would you like to address that?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's one of the big problems we face after the coup is that, we have been running from exile for many years. And then, as Thida said, we moved back to Burma in 2012. And we had a talk with the government at the time, and they said they committed to, for the democratization, and we said, okay, we want to also set up the office, and we do our news media because we want to be on the ground. We don't want to operate from Oslo. We want to be where the news are happening. And they said, you're welcome, you can come. And so we gradually expand. So we shut down the office in Oslo, and we moved partly to Thailand, partly to Yangon, to Burma. And we gradually expand our operation in Burma. But while keeping the office in Thailand, because we were not totally 100% sure. But then in 2017, when Aung San Suu Kyi government came to power, the government came to power in 2016. So we waited 1 year before we decided, okay, now we can move to Burma, where we can operate more freely. So everybody from Thailand moved to Burma. So the whole operation, it's happening in the country. And then, as Thida said, everybody knows. It's like they are celebrating in Burma, in fact. Whoever on the TV, people know them from our old exile period and also in the country. So what happened is when the coup, the military seized power, not only the public, the military also know our people. That was the biggest problem. While we were living in exile, our reporter names inside the country were kept secret. It's a total top secret, confidential. So authority didn't know, not even their friends know, not even their family member know that they were working for us. We kept it totally secret. But now we are up in the air, and we had to register. We do it very transparent because we don't want to, now we are above the ground, we have to operate openly. So that was the biggest problem. And we still have people. We had to officially, because they revoked our license 1 month after the coup. In fact, they pulled the plug like 1 hour after the military coup on the 1st February. They pulled the plug, and we were totally blacked out. But they didn't revoke our license until 1 month later. And they totally banned us from doing any kind of media job. So since then, we officially fire everyone. So we almost have to dissolve to make it clear that, nobody working for DVB officially any longer. But we still have people.
Will you re-emerge in, let's say, some of the same model that you had in the past, before 2012? Is that possible with, some support from Norway, perhaps, and with some support from other internationals, and also with some feet on the ground, as you did under the previous dictatorship?
Exactly. I mean, that is something, not new for us, because we had operated from exile for the last, the previous over 20 years. We've done that. But right now, I think the problem is the coup was totally unexpected. So we are in the process of retreat. We have to kind of leave. Some of the people had to leave because we need to maintain the operation from exile. And then we need to regroup because people are scattered around. And then we had to rebuild. That's the 3 steps that we have to do. That's for the exile kind of things. But then inside the country, of course, we had to go back in the old day, when we were operating from exile. And we're quite confident that we can do that.
Thida, I again ask you then, do you foresee that there could be a kind of combination of media in exile and citizen journalists, so to say, working from the ground? Is that possible? Do you think so? And another question perhaps also, you said the coup was totally unexpected, but if we look at the statistics of the placement of Burma on the Press Freedom Index, it was sliding for quite some years before the coup d'etat happened. Please, Thida.
Well, you see, for me, coup is not totally unexpected, Only the 2008 constitution is like a double blade for whether we going to have a coup or not? This is like the double blade for both military and us, Then obviously military never willing to give up their power. Then they did it. So the situation, the press freedom situation inside was, as you said, before the coup, not very in good shape, because I think in that sense, also I can point out this 2008 constitution and the other factors prohibiting the whole society not to adopt some very promising laws, something like that. That's why I mentioned about right to information. That's why since we never ever have right to information as a law or the concept or the principle for our society, the information and the media literacy is also in very big question mark. For that reason, it's very, very easy for the military to handle the heavy propaganda, even though they cannot control anymore in sense of the censorship. But the peer censorship is so going on, For that reason, I think the another problem is I share the feeling from Thida, even though whether we, the citizens of Myanmar, are in physical freedom or the safe places, we never safe. We ever carrying such a big, heavy concern. Because, for example, if they targeted someone, if they cannot arrest that one, they're going to arrest the family members of that person. And then next morning, that one of the family member could be killed. Something like that. They have totally indiscriminatory effect in the atrocity towards its own citizens. That's the way the military is becoming the terrorist organization right now, something like that. So I think the real concept of opening up in 2010 and onwards itself is just to showcase, they are doing the right thing, but indeed they never ever want to do. So the whole situation from 2010 to 2021 is also pretty much bizarre. Now we can learn, this is totally kind of the fake for us. And then towards your question about the role of the citizen journalists, I think the another problem is because of the very heavy censorship and the propaganda and the very poor, ineffective education system, especially about media and information literacy. I think we still do need the professionalism in journalism. So a little bit controversial side effect about the citizen journalist is, it's really hard to verify. And then interpretation. It's not just about information. I think role of the professional journalism is not just about access to information, but also about the interpretation. This is also pretty much important. And then, of course, editing. The people, because of the very heavy censorship for more than 5 decades, people cannot differentiate between the editing and the censorship. So for that reason, we are in very, very difficult situation right now. And I really prefer not just the citizen journalists, but also the role of the professional journalists in order to keep the whole society well-informed, well-interpreted, and having real public opinions based on information, not just based on emotion.
Thank you, Thida. Not a very optimistic perspective there, but still quite realistic, I believe. I turn to Jesper Højberg now. International media support has long been observing the development from inside both the two countries, and there are also similarities and, of course, also differences. Which obstacles has your staff met, and indeed yourself met, in the work of monitoring the situation in these two countries? We now try to include also the previous country in focus, Afghanistan, but we will end up with some questions concerning what we can do from here. Please, Jesper.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thanks for organizing this. I think this is absolutely important. I want to pay tribute to what we've just heard, to the journalists, to the media that we have just heard from. Anything that we can do as IMS, International Media Support, depends on the courage. We heard the 4 C's of Hamed before. I think they're quite to the point. There's nothing we can do unless local journalists have the courage and also the connections. Everything in difficult environment depends on connections. And the content part has been mentioned by many. Ultimately for us, and it's about ensuring that the public have access to information. And this is what you have been fiercely working with and for all your professional career. I just want to say one anecdote on DVB. When we started looking at, before the coup, who was actually the most popular, who was mostly accessed by the Myanmar public of the media that had come back and established themselves in Myanmar, it was actually DVB, both at national level and at local level. So I think there's a lot to your professionalism and to your courage of re-establishing yourself. And that gives me also hope for ensuring that you can continue to work, because of course we have to continue. I think this is what we heard from Agnes. This is not the time to stop. I think we are of course in a situation where it's global scale action that we have to ensure, but making sure that it's not happening without closely connecting to partners in Afghanistan and partners in Myanmar, whether they are inside or outside. And we have to think in a combination between protection, we've heard it from Agnes, we've heard it from you, but also finding new ways and looking. I can't reveal all the details of what we're doing at the moment in Afghanistan, in Myanmar, but I can tell you courage is still present. There is still, it's still possible actually to support media inside Myanmar and those who are just across the border. And many of you are very, very experienced and flexible and able to deal with the most difficult circumstances. And this is what gives me hope, and this is what gives us hope as an organization, that you continue to work, whether you are in Oslo or in Thailand or in any country in the region. There is connections remain, and this is the fortunate part of the world that we live in, that we can maintain in touch and in contact with each other. And I think that's what also counts when we want to continue to do journalism inside Myanmar and inside Afghanistan.
Thank you. I think this is a good point to almost round up with, but not totally, because when you talk about the digital connections that are there now, they are not always there. No. I'm currently writing about India, and in India, in Kashmir, they had the longest internet closed down 5 months in a row. Total breakdown. I mean, governments can do such things. So we should be aware of that digital connection is also at times fragile. But now I want to challenge all 4 of you for the final little question, or big question maybe. What can the international community do to alleviate the situation, to support journalists who want to stay in the country, who want to evacuate also? What can Norway do? What can the international society do? I'll start again with Thida, please.
Well, you know, for our problem is not just about the crisis for the journalism. The real problem is the system itself. So I prefer the international interventions to stop the coup, abolish the attempt of the coup. This is the only solution we can save all of our lives. So, and the most problematic part right now is the extrajudiciary killing inside, not just the civil war. So I think the presence of the third-party security forces is the one of the solutions to make the stability inside and to save not just the journalists, but also the livelihoods of the journalists or the others. Without that, we cannot make any improvement. So it's a very ambitious solution, I know. But on the other hand, of course, the here, I think the role of the diaspora populations in order to bridge in between the citizen journalists on the ground and the professional journalists on the air, I think that's why the respective international communities and the governments also think about supporting not just the on the ground journalists, but also the diaspora populations and their activities. Through them, we can reach out to the citizen journalists or the ground information. So I think this is how we can make improvement.
Thank you, Thida, for joining us from afar. We turn now to Thida here. What would be your advice to the international community and to Norway in particular?
Yes, I agree with Thida, and also I think as we are in the media industry, I want to urge the international media, especially here in Norway media also, to report about Burma as much as you could, because after I arrived here, I understood that before May there were quite a lot of news about Burma, but after May there is not much news about Burma. So I also try to think myself, is it because of they don't get the enough information about Burma or not? So in that case, if it is because of that, then we Burmese journalists have to provide and contact more to the Norwegian media industry and also the international.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Thida. Ai-chan, please, shortly also.
Yeah, try to be short. But I like to compare from the 1988, that was the first time, because in our generation there was the two big events. One that directly involved us back in 1988. There was another military coup, and there was a crackdown, and that's the time we left. So I was a student activist, and Thida was 18, as she said. So we live in exile, and then we set up the radio station in Norway. At the time, there was no computers, no internet. There was no communication. Was really bad, and people were quite scared. So when we set up the radio station in Oslo, we called people inside Burma, and we said we're calling from Democratic Republic of Burma, and there was no answer. They hung up the phone. People were so scared, and then gradually it's opened up. People dared to speak. And then when we moved back, everyone was really speaking out, not only against the military, but also against the NLD, Aung San Suu Kyi. People were really the younger generation coming up, really enjoying the freedom that they've got. Of course, things are not exactly what you wanted, 100%, but things are changing. And especially under the NLD government, there was lots of backward, but still there are lots of improving. So what I'm trying to compare is now in this 2021, the military coup, the country was totally different. The communication was there, mobile phone there, the internet there, and the younger people have tasted the freedom. That's a huge difference. In our time, we'd never really had tasted the freedom. We were living under the military since 1962. Until 1988, there was no freedom of expression. There was nothing, no human rights. People shouting for human rights, but didn't really understand what was a human right or democracy. But now the younger generation, they know, they're so brave. And that's why today is 9 months exactly after the coup. And the military still cannot able to control the country, which is a huge difference. And you can see the bravery of the young generation, people that are coming up, and you can see the journalists still reporting, working as underground. And that's what I want to say. for the international assistance, the support from Norway. Keep us your support, your cooperation with media organizations. And I know that Norway has been supporting us for a long time, from the beginning. And not only DVB, but also other local media groups, ethnic media groups, and of course, not just media, but also the civil society group. I think this is a time we need most of your help. And this is the time that you need to stick with us. And I see, hope. I totally believe, like our time, it took 23 years before we can go back. I hope this time maybe not that long.
I think we all share that hope. Jesper, you have some advice too?
I think most of it has been said. I think it's not the time to pull back; it's time to invest. And I think Norway has always shown the way, and so has the Nordic countries, Denmark and Sweden, and this needs to continue. I think there's an absolutely important point about the taste of freedom that we have seen both in Afghanistan and in Myanmar, that we have a moral obligation to continue to support and be very specific in the way we support, based on the understanding that you have of the reality on the ground. And the closer we can get to understand also that reality, the organization that I represent, we take pride also in being very, very close to the countries, Myanmar and Afghanistan, and even still have staff in Afghanistan and just across the border in Myanmar also, because we need to be able to respond to a reality that are constantly changing. And this is, of course, the real difficult part in Afghanistan now is that it's not a settled political reality. So we have to be extremely pragmatic and flexible together with local partners. And just my last point is that we cannot do anything without the local partners, whether it's in Myanmar or in Afghanistan. And that's why we take put a lot of emphasis also ensuring the protection of our local partners. This is as upfront, and it was mentioned by Agnes, and it's something that, whether it's inside or outside, because this is ultimately the precondition for ensuring that you can continue to work as journalists, and also bearing in mind that the economic reality is also what makes it possible for media to continue, and we have to address that. It's not enough that donor funding comes in. We have to work with media. You had a business viability strategy also, and you continue to focus on that because you don't want to be depending on donors. But the reality right now is that donors have to invest.
Thank you. We have
can I just one sentence?
One sentence, please.
No, I was planning to say I totally share our Afghan colleagues. What happening when we see on the TV, what happening in Kabul and Afghanistan, I felt exactly the pain. We can feel it because we have been there like a few months before you. And Najiba, the one who spoke, I've been working with her for the last 20 years. We were really close. I've been to Kabul, she's been to Yangon. So we've really want to show the solidarity with Afghan colleagues.
That is a very interesting and big question, how to develop this solidarity. To wrap this up, I just want to say one thing. This is about saving journalism. It's about saving journalists' lives also. We have touched upon both. And to paraphrase a bit, you see this exhibition behind you here of Afghan photographers. And the title of that exhibition was, "Where there is a war, there is still life." And we could twist that sentence by the inspiration of Dr. Hamed saying, "Where there is life, there is still courage." Thank you all for coming. Thanks to the panel, thanks to the audience, thanks to the digital audience, and thanks for now. This is the end of this session.